나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 Hello everyone, how are you doing? Okay, I'm going to test something today because I'm tired of seeing those frame drops, as you may have witnessed in yesterday's video. So I'm going to try recording in the MKV format of OBS. If you guys have experience on this, whether to use MKV or the MOV or the MP4 format, I tried MP4 for a long time and it seemed to work, but I was having trouble, so I went to the MOV format, which has been working fine until the last few months. I've noticed, and maybe it was doing it before and I didn't notice, these skipping frames, and I've tried changing the codecs to the X264 instead of the hardware, and tried all sorts of things. Now I'm going to try their OBS's favorite format, the MKV. It does work in Resolve, DaVinci Resolve. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. If you have any opinions or knowledge or experience with that and hardware, just let me know in the comments. I'd appreciate hearing about it. I'm obviously less than a professional YouTuber. My motivation for this channel is simply to share knowledge of the transmission, the correct transmission of Shakyamuni's teachings via the scholarship all the way through Nichiren, and to thusly assist others, encourage others, and give contemporary language to remove the veils of understanding from countless cultures of language bias and so forth that can get in the way of understanding the meaning of Shakyamuni's teachings. In that vein, before we continue, because we started yesterday with MulaMadhyamakaKarika, Nagarjuna's Middle Way, and I already told you about this book. I did want to say something about emptiness, or Sunyata, and how charismatic those words are, and how, because of the charisma around those words, we, as Shakyamuni said, we get hooked on the words, and it short circuits us to understand the meaning of the conversation. So I said yesterday, I talked about earlier teachings being much more focused on the emptiness, or the non-arisen, non-enduring, non-decaying, non-ending nature of life as pertains to a self, I, mine, yours, possession, right? It's all about attachment, really. But we get lost in this idea that, what do you mean I'm not really here? What do you mean I'm here as a construct of my imagination, my mind, my assembled energies coalescing and manifesting this group, this massive group of inertia and momentum that I call an I, a self. All that language stuck around that can be an obstacle, quite an obstacle, actually. So I wanted to take a different stab at this. It came to me during Gongyo. And I don't know, I may just be creating more words around this, but I'm going to give it a shot, briefly, if I can do something briefly. I think all of us would agree that as we go through an arc of a day, how many times do we lay ourselves down in bed at night to go to sleep and kind of run through the events of the day? Or maybe you do that at the dinner table after you've done eating and you're sitting and you're considering watching TV, or after you're done watching it, whenever you do it, do you review the entire day? My contention is you probably only review certain moments. You certainly don't follow yourself going into your bathroom, doing your toiletries, doing all of that, except for maybe some specific thing. Oh yeah, I need to buy more mascara or whatever it is. I'm out of toilet paper. What I want to get to is I want you to try an experiment this week, just this week. Just at some time of the day when you find yourself reviewing, I want you to try to list for yourself maybe 1, maybe 5 distinct moments when you were, how to say this, engaged in some kind of shock, fear, anger, surprise, some very strong emotional outburst, manifestation. And I want you to really pick one and take it apart. Like, I'll just pick one, but this could be anything, please. I remember, here's one I experienced myself. I was on my motorcycle, and I was waiting for a light to change, and it changed, and I had cars on either side of me, and it changed, and I gave it the gas to move out into the intersection to make my left turn. So I had cars in the straight through lane, cars turning left next to me, and I took off in the middle of them to make the left turn, get out of the way of the cars, and go. I had a green light, green arrow. And my bike did this little, it lurched for a moment. In other words, my forward momentum stalled out for a moment before it caught itself. In that moment, as I was looking at the front tire, because I was looking for my balance as I was barely moving, right? A speeding small pickup truck went flying through the red light. And the rear bumper of that truck just nicked my front tire. Just enough to, it's a big bike, so it didn't knock me over. It just made the handlebars go boom. Just for a fraction of a second, I knew my front tire was hit by that truck. And at that moment, the engine caught back up and sent me forward. And I probably made the slowest left turn I've ever made, because I was in a state of, really kind of a state of shock. I was trying to put together what had just happened. And what I remember doing as I was moving through the left turn was looking to my right and watching that pickup truck that was now skidding. Probably scared the crap out of him that as he was running the light, he was going to hit a motorcycle. But the wheels locked on it and kept zigzagging all the way down the road into the center divider, and I think he hit something. But that was just like an incidental side frame note in my brain as I then was guiding my motorcycle and kind of took off down the road at slow speed and slowly kind of moved over to the right and maybe 100 yards stopped on the side of the road with my foot on the sidewalk on the curb, just catching my breath and trying to review what had just happened. I'm not saying you have that kind of moment every day, but maybe somebody cut you off on your way to work. Maybe you ran out to the car to go to work and you suddenly realize you left your keys in the house, and oh my God, I locked the door. Something that stirred, you know, the kind of reaction I'm talking about now, right? The kind of an emotive state that was completely in the moment. It wasn't a build up to something frustrating or loving or exciting. It was just a boom, a reactive state. Okay? Now, obviously, that kind of thing, I know for me, I was reviewing the rest of the day. It didn't leave me. I started looking at it from a dozen different angles. Now, in my younger self, much younger self, I probably would have been overcome with fury. Fury directed at that jerk that ran the red light. That son of a bitch almost killed me. Right? I mean, I don't think I'm alone in that kind of a reaction. There would be a sense of gratitude of, I'm not dead. Secondly, my motorcycle still works. My transportation still works. Thirdly, I can still go about my day. But overall, anger at the threat of taking all of that away and more. You can just extrapolate forever. My relationships, my blah, 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 blah. And at the end of that, as you calm down from whatever, whether it's excitement or something like I just described, other thoughts start to creep in. Like, I'm so lucky my motorcycle wasn't running very well. That for whatever reason, it choked on some gasoline. Now you can get auspicious about it. Oh, the universe intervened. Right? Watch where, what I want you to do is select one of these moments that you can analyze ad nauseum and watch where your mind goes. Whether it was my karma or the Buddhist gods or forces of nature that somehow prohibited this incident from being far, far worse. Or whether it was my karma, my forces of nature, my whatever, that stuck my nose out a little sooner than I should have, seeing it that way. How did I bring this to my world? Am I just the victim of another person's karma? Am I the effect of something they need to learn about not running frickin' red lights? See, you can circle this like the cameras in The Matrix. I know I use that movie a lot, but anyway. You could endlessly dissect this thing. Okay, so you've got my example. You're going to spend a couple of moments this week, hopefully, doing what I just described. Try to take apart some moment where some kind of emotive, some kind of reactionary, some kind of reaction, shocking, whatever, emotive state occurred to you, even if it's just waiting in line at the grocery store and somebody cutting in line. You're right? We are so volatile. Even if we don't do anything, our minds are bang going, right? Because I really, 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 really want you to get this point. When Nagarjuna takes to task Sunyata, what we in English tend to call emptiness, some void. These words, they just don't capture what this central point of Buddhism is. And that point is this. In that moment, and in the ensuing moments that I spent so much mental energy trying to understand, trying to recapture, try to re-experience, really, that amazing crisis. Everything from my anger and what it was directed toward, my fears, which I wouldn't really want to spend a lot of time thinking upon, but fear of death, fear of losing my life or my motorcycle's life or the life of others, my possessions is what I'm saying. All of the things that this I thinks it possesses, this body, these limbs, these clothes, this vehicle, this time, this moment in time, the implication of this time into the future time. Blame. Who owns the blame? Whose fault was this? Whose luck was this? What about my life? His life, her life. Dissect the crap out of this thing. Everything that's locked into your moment is about ownership and the threat of ownership. All of it, every single aspect of it, is what we call, with English words, attachment. Attachment, why? Because everything we possess is an explicit statement of permanence. We simply, at our core, with our human mind, resist the idea that we are a floating point through a process, like a wave on the ocean. We have the arrogance as a wave, thinking that we are a distinct wave. Our experience is distinct. That you can celebrate. That you can clutch as precious. But to be a wave is simply an expression of a vast ocean. And every wave around you is another expression of the vast ocean. There's nothing that special about waves. The only thing special, which is exactly why it's so precious, is your experience of waveness. And so when we use these words, emptiness, void, we're not saying nothingness. We're not saying that everything should be thrown away, that you should just hover on a cloud of lotus petals. That's not it at all. It's a negation. Remember we started this? The 8 great negations? The motorcycle, the truck, the time, the lights, the green light, the red light, the who's right, the who's wrong, all of that. They're simply tendencies and conditions. They're part of the ocean. My witnessing of this is a reminder of how ephemeral this life experience is. In other words, when that moment happened, should have my mind, my Buddha mind, simply gone, wow, that was a reminder. How glorious that I'm still here riding my cool motorcycle. Let's get on with things. Oh, I hope they're okay. If you know someone who tends to look at the world that way, albeit maybe through rose-colored glasses, and I'm not saying they're right, but how quick are we to dismiss them? Ah, you don't understand. I almost lost my life. Almost. Which means you didn't. It's like George Carlin's joke about airports and this vernacular of planes that come real close to each other in the sky, and they call it a near miss. Ooh, it was a near miss. And George Carlin says, a near miss is a collision. What do you mean near miss? It was a near hit. That I could see you get excited about. But a near miss? Eh. Right? And George was brilliant at dissecting our words. So, I say all of this because all of that investment of energy, life, time that should have been spent appreciating was so neurotically compelled to review possession, ownership, risk, fear, all of it. Malaise, stress, and anxiety, suffering. All self-generated. Self-generated in service of what? A near miss? So what Buddhism is saying and what Nagarjuna is nailing to the floor is all of that is empty. There's your stressing and your anxiety over something that doesn't exist in time or space. You're contriving and creating all of this stress and anxiety for yourself. Stop it. And so Nagarjuna takes it to the nth degree. That motorcycle has no intrinsic value. It has value to me because I'm attached to it. Yes, physically, but emotionally. I've given it all sorts of valuations. It's my transportation. It takes me places where I want to go. I have so many myriad just agglomerations of ownership, possession, characteristics, even love for it. And it, in fact, it's not even a motorcycle, and it's this assemblage of parts that do something. Take it apart. If that's what it takes to detach, de-invest. Because all the investment you need is for life. and how amazing life is. Appreciating the life of others as a reflection of your own life. Bodhisattva. Do you see? This is a mental deconstruction. Buddhism is about the mind. And in discussing just a little bit that I have about this experience that I had on my motorcycle, I can't even, as I sit here thinking about it, I can't define the amount of moments of reasoning and attachment and everything that was going through me for at least the next couple of days. Everyone I talked to, man, you won't believe what happened to me at that intersection. You know that intersection where it's exhausting. Why is it exhausting? Because it's stressful. It's filled with anxiety. And most of that stress and anxiety is about stuff that didn't even occur. Yeah, that was a surprise moment. But what it did was confront myriad levels of attachment, possession, desire, earth, samsaric, tension. How do you release that tension? Yes, you release it internally, but to go beyond self-control is to get rid of that possessive, that I am part of, everything is part of me. That's all just self-identification again. Understand that not only are your thoughts samsaric thoughts, unreal, based on real reality, is that everything is of that vapor. Everything is a temporary wave on the ocean. Everything. The motorcycle, the road, the other drivers, the light, the signal, the weather. They're all their own little waves on the ocean. See the water. Be the water. Be entertained and enjoy the features, the waves, but see them as their own little peaks and valleys of the water. Don't invest yourself in them, because then when they arise and disappear, you're affected, you're invested in their existence. That whole experience is empty. It's constructed. It arises, it endures, it decays, it goes away. And at some point, you will figure out that that arising, that enduring, that decay, and that disappearance is also a possession, an observation that you try to cling to. When you can get rid of that idea, then you will be the water. Make sense? So emptiness, the ocean isn't empty, but the ocean is absolutely empty of waves. Yes, I know you smart guys are telling me, but it has currents. It has hot and cold. Yeah. It's an analogy. I hope that's useful. Go through the exercise and see if you can name all of the strange little things that pop up, issues in your life, possessions, ideas of possessions that you have in your life that are about emotions, about things, right? What they say, thingify. When you thingify a wave by giving it a word, a label, you make the wave something separate from the ocean. It is not. It's just ocean. It's hard to think of life that way. And that's why we have all these mental exercises we go through to open doors of understanding, getting insights. Oh, I think I get that. So this next part, an analysis of conditions. All of this dialogue simply for one little verse. I'm going to read the verse first. Not from itself, not from another, not from both, nor without cause. Never in any way is there any existing thing that has arisen. Given what I've just said, does that pique curiosity? This is the first of several chapters investigating the concept of causation. It is important to note at the outset that in classical Indian philosophy, causation is usually understood as a relation between entities. Quote, the seed together with warm, moist soil is the cause of the sprout, end quote. And not, as in modern science, between events. The collision caused the motion of the ball. It begins with a statement of the thesis that existing things do not arise in any of the four logically possible ways that causation might be thought to involve. The Abhidharma opponent, i.e., a member of one of the Abhidharma schools, then introduces a conditions-based analysis of causation, which is a verse of the second of the four possible views concerning causation. The remainder of the chapter consists of arguments against the details of this theory that entities arise in dependence on distinct conditions. In outline, the chapter proceeds as follows. 1.1, assertion. No entity arises in any of the four possible ways. A, from itself. Nothing is made of itself because itself is a perception of the tendencies and conditions. So, I don't make me. I perceive a me, but that's an illusion. From a distinct cause, I am the result of. From both itself and something distinct, I'm here now because I've made me and put me here. Perceptually, you could make that argument, but it's vapor, right? Or D, without cause. I didn't just appear, right? Maybe as you switched on YouTube and hit a video, I appeared, but that's not me instantiating out of midair. 1.2, general refutation of arising on possibilities A and D, from itself or without cause. 1.3, opponent, entities arise B in dependence on distinct conditions of the four kinds. Right? I'm a result of energies and work and karma combining with other, right? And you can start to argue this. 1.4, refutation of relation between conditions and causal activities. 1.5 through 6, definition of condition and argument for the impossibility of anything meeting the definition. 1.7 through 10, refutations on each of the four conditions. And 1.11 to 14, refutation of thesis that effect arises from conditions. Tendencies and conditions are characteristics of modes of movement, kinetics, energy. So to blame what happens around that energy on the energy is illogical. We'll get into it. So this is where we start, 1.1. Not from itself, not from another, not from both, nor without cause. Never in any way is there any existing thing, thingifying, that has arisen. In other words, you perceive a wave, but the wave is not manifest because you perceive it. That's yours. No thing exists, which is fabrication of your mind, because it itself, wave, has manifest. That's your perception of water that you're imposing on that tendency and condition. You see where it starts to, we're shaving little thin layers here of understanding. This is the overall conclusion for which Nagarjuna will argue in this chapter, that existence, the things of existence. You need to read it because the spelling is definitely hard to convey verbally. Do not come into existence as a result of causes and conditions. They're perceptions outside of the thingness. There are four possible ways in which this might be thought to happen, the thing in itself being a thing. And he rejects all of them. According to the first, when an effect seems to arise, it does so because it was already in some sense present in its cause. Its appearance is really just the manifestation of something that already existed. Word problem here. The second view claims instead that the cause and effect are distinct entities. The third has it that cause and effect may be said to be both identical and distinct. There's wind on the water, and there's a rise due to resistance of the water's surface to the wind, creating a wave. So the wave exists of its own, or does it exist because of the wind, or does it exist because of the wind and the qualities, conditions of the water? The fourth claims that things originate without any cause. Since there are thus no causes, an originating thing could not be said to originate either from itself or from something distinct. It does not originate from anything. We follow Yi 2011 and accordingly diverge from translations that follow the Lavalle-Poussin edition in reversing the order of the second and third verses of this chapter. This ordering is clearly attested to by the Akutobaya and the commentaries of Buddhapalita and Bhaviveka. On this reading, general arguments against all four views are given in the next verse, but in his commentary or his comments on this verse, Bhaviveka anticipates by giving arguments against the four views. He says, for instance, that the fourth view would mean that anything could be produced from anything at any time. Something we know is false. 1.2. The intrinsic nature of existence, those components of existence, does not, see, existence, the way I'm saying it there, existents, like the tenants, like the renters of apartments, the existence does not exist in the condition, etc. The intrinsic nature. See, nothing, there's no atom of wave. The intrinsic nature not occurring, neither is extrinsic nature found. So if it isn't made of something pre-existing, then it does not persist to exist in that way. No arising, no decay. It's just a manifestation, like, sparks. Yeah, it's hard to talk about this. According to the Akutobaya 2ab, I'm not sure what that means, gives the argument, this second verse, gives the argument against the first possibility mentioned in the verse 1, that an existent arises from itself, the view known as Satkarayavada. The argument is that if out of which the existent arose were really that existent itself, then it should have the intrinsic nature, svabhava, of the existent. But this is simply not the case. Indeed, as all the other commentators point out, if this were the case, then arising would be pointless. So if a wave is made of a wave, then what need is there for wave? There's already a wave. So there's no reason to become a wave. If you're made of wave, then you're done. Why does wave have to make wave? Makes no sense, right? For instance, we want to know the cause of fire because we want to produce something with its intrinsic nature, heat. If that nature were already present in its cause, then it would be pointless to produce fire. For then, in order to feel heat, we would only need to touch unignited fuel. Right? If fire produces heat, and heat is made of heat, then why need the fire? Just put your hand near the log and you'll feel heat. You don't have to set it on fire, right? Here we go again with the old man and his meds. Again, according to Akutobaya 2CD, and I guess that's the second stanza, gives the argument against the second possibility mentioned in verse 1, that an existent arises from something distinct from itself. This would mean that the existent must borrow its nature from its cause, thus making its nature something that is extrinsic. The argument is that in the absence of the intrinsic nature of the existent in question, its extrinsic nature is likewise not to be found. This is because in order for something to exist, its intrinsic nature must occur. There is, for instance, no fire without the occurrence of heat, and something... page-turning karma. And something cannot be in the position of borrowing a nature from something else unless it exists. So, an existent cannot arise from something distinct. For more on this, see chapters 10 and 20. The third possibility is to be rejected on the grounds that it inherits all the faults of the first and second, And according to the Akotobaya, the fourth is false because it is one of the extreme views rejected by the Buddha. Other commentators give more philosophically respectable reasons to reject this view. Third stanza, the opponent. There are four conditions: the primary cause, the objective support, the proximate condition, and, of course, the dominant condition. There is no fifth condition. Okay. The commentators represent this as the view of a Buddhist opponent, someone who holds the second of the four possible views about the relationship between cause and effect mentioned in verse 1. Candrakirti has this opponent begin by rehearsing the reasons for rejecting the first, third, and fourth views. On the first, origination would be pointless, since the desired effect would already exist, right? You don't have to make a wave if there's already a wave, so why make the wave? But that doesn't deny the wave. We seek knowledge of causes because we find ourselves wanting to produce something that does not currently exist. The third view is to be rejected because it is a conjunction of the first and second, and we already know that the first is false. The fourth view, that of causelessness, is one of the absurd extremes said to be false by the Buddha. But the opponent claims the second view was taught by the Buddha and so should not be rejected. The classification of four kinds of condition is the Abhidharma elaboration of the Buddha's teaching of origination. The primary cause is that from which the effect is thought to have been produced. For example, the seed in the case of a sprout. Only a cognition has an objective support, namely its intentional object, that of which it is conscious, which is what I was saying earlier. The wave exists because you seek to make it exist by defining it and giving it a name. Apologize, but I'll forget if I don't do this now. A visual cognition has a color and shape, dharma as its objective support, the cognition thinking about, is that entity or event that immediately precedes the effect and that cedes its place to the effect. That's a contortion. The dominant condition is that without which the effect would not arise. After criticizing the basic notion of causation, Nagarjuna will take up each of these four types in turn. Primary cause in verse 7, objective support in verse 8, proximate condition in verse 9, and dominant condition in verse 10. So stay tuned. Candrakirti sets the stage for verse 4 by having the opponent answer the question raised by the second stanza, or verse, as follows. Quote, then, given such a refutation of the view that origination is by means of conditions, the view will be entertained that origination is by means of action. The conditions, such as vision and color and shape, do not directly cause consciousness as effect, but conditions are so called because they result in a consciousness producing action. And this action produces consciousness. Thus, consciousness is produced by a condition possessing consciousness producing action, not by conditions as porridge is produced by the action of cooking. Interesting. 4. An action does not possess conditions, nor is it devoid of conditions. Conditions are not devoid of an action, neither are they provided with an action. This action, this is starting to get long-winded now. You know what? We'll start back up on this tomorrow. I hope that by now, even though this text is, if you read the Karika alone, I would almost argue, at least in my case, that just reading it as a song lyric, reading each of these points, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 27, the meaning starts to gel, starts to appear. You start to get insights and get it. I'm not sure that all of this other verbiosity of the authors is necessary in order to get the insights. It's interesting reading, and it may actually help you, so I'm not telling you to cast it away. But for me, I found that without having to analyze every word and just simply read through, like a song, the lyrics, things started to form. Understanding, insights started to form in my head. That's when I got excited about reading Nagarjuna. Otherwise, frankly, it's a slog. It's a very hyper-intellectual dissection for the purposes of making precision understanding of the teachings of Shakyamuni. And actually, I would think would beget a greater appreciation for Shakyamuni's skill at storytelling, because expedient means being his way of bringing people to understanding deeper assets within their consciousnesses. It's a much more gentle and universal way to open the mind. But every now and again, somebody like Nagarjuna has to come along and go, wait. You guys are going way out left field here. Come on back. Let me make this point clear, and then dissects. That's not for everyone, admittedly. So I understand if this is somewhat distasteful. I'm trying to present it in a way that might help open the doors a little bit. I think it's really helpful to understand that empty, void, those words are not about nothing or nothingness. They're about the intrinsic nature of our attachments to thingifying. That is what precipitates all our sufferings, whether it be stress, anxiety, whatever word you like. That to experience without the possession, the obsession, the hanging on to, the permanent making, is to free yourself to ride the waves. Keep coming back to that. I hope it's helpful. Anyway, thank you. I'm proud of you. If you made it this far, I'm super proud of you. Keep up your practice. Be kind to yourself and others. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.